The world cheered, but heaven didn't speak. And that silence was not divine, because what I felt didn't come from heaven. I wasn't supposed to speak again, not after what I saw, not after I promised I'd take it to the grave. But something in his smile shattered me. They said, Leo the 14th is hope, but my soul whispered something else. A silence, not the holy kind. A silence that swallows, that twists, that echoes like an empty church where God hasn't walked in years. That night, I sat alone in the chapel. No lights, no incense, just stone, just silence, just one question. Lord, is it just me? If you've ever felt that too, if your soul ever flinched at something everyone else clapped for, just whisper back. He knows I felt it. And then I died. Not a metaphor, not a dream. My heart stopped, my body fell, and I crossed. No tunnel, no warmth, no welcome, just a silence thick enough to drown in. I stood in what looked like heaven, but didn't breathe like it. The air was sterile, too perfect. The walls shimmered like gold, but the kind of gold that blinds, not blesses. And at the center, Leo, younger, radiant, draped in robes that pulsed like living metal. His voice was calm, gentle, but behind it, something else spoke. Unity, reconciliation, brotherhood. Each word rolled out like a hymn written by hands that never touched scripture. Then, behind me, a voice, not loud, not angry, but final. This is not the throne of my father. The ground cracked, not from below, but from within. The walls bled light. The cardinals froze mid-applause. And Leo, he didn't fall. He hovered, his eyes turned to me. Not with wrath, but with a look I'll never forget. The kind of pity you give a drowning man when you have no intention of pulling him out. That's when I realized I wasn't in heaven. I was in the imitation. If that shook you, wait for what hasn't been shown. Because what's coming next doesn't ask for belief. It demands discernment. A place built to feel sacred, just holy enough to fool the desperate. The walls pulsed, symbols shimmered. Crosses, yes, but bent, inverted, distorted, until they became something else. Crowns fused with eyes, doves without wings, a tabernacle made of teeth. This wasn't deception through evil. It was beauty used as camouflage. And still, he spoke. Love above truth, unity above doctrine. Every word sounded right until you tasted it. Because truth without edges becomes syrup, and love without sacrifice becomes seduction. Then I saw it, a shadow behind his throne. It didn't move, it didn't speak, but its wings were folded like blades. Its breath smelled of roses soaked in blood. It held a broken scepter, and it watched, like it owned the room. I tried to scream, but before the floor opened, something broke inside me. I had seen the signs, but I stayed quiet. I feared being mocked more than I feared being wrong. And in that silence, the fissure came. Not fire, faces, thousands of them, screaming, but silent, like souls being sucked through a crack between worlds. Their mouths moved, but no sound came, just the ache. That's when another voice came, closer, older, quieter. A man, no, a being, stood beside me, ash-stained robes, a staff cracked like old wood. His face looked like sunlight through weeping glass. And he whispered, "Deception doesn't come wrapped in horns. It comes wrapped in welcome." I fell. Then the projection began. Lights rose like spirits, casting scenes across the sky. Leo visiting synagogues, mosques, temples, embracing all, signing scrolls, holding candles. The crowd shouted, "One flock, one shepherd." But the words, when they reached my ears, twisted. One fire, one name, one power. I couldn't move, not from fear, but from thirst. A thirst for something real, something holy, something bloody and hard and true. And then I heard him, not in volume, not in vision, but behind the veil, whispered, "This is not my son." Everything went still. The lights vanished. The throne dissolved. Only one thing remained, a door, stone, heavy, with a lamb carved into it, weeping. It opened, and I knew this wasn't over, because what waits behind that door was never meant to be seen alive. It was darker behind that door, but not the darkness of absence. It was the kind that listens. I didn't walk, I was pulled, not by force, but by something deeper. Truth doesn't need hands, only permission. This place didn't try to impress. No gold, no light, just stone, alive, breathing with something ancient. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with memory, thick with names never spoken aloud. I stepped deeper. There was no ceiling, no sky, only presence, the kind that watches without blinking. Then I saw the hall, long, empty, but I wasn't alone. On both sides, angels stood, not painted, not imagined. Their armor shimmered like thunder, trapped in glass. Their faces weren't faces at all, just fire shaped like intention. And in their hands, books, sealed, glowing, alive. I didn't ask why I was there. My soul already knew. This was judgment, but not for the world, for the shepherds. And I was about to witness what heaven remembered. When earth conveniently forgot, from the far end, he entered. Not radiant, not adored. Leo the 14th, this time walking. Each step heavier than the last. His robes no longer shimmered. He looked like a man who had carried 1,000,000 prayers, but answered none. He didn't glance at me. He looked only at the throne, not to sit, but to stand beneath it. The first angel broke a seal and read aloud. In the year 2025, he blessed the synod that erased the exclusivity of salvation through Christ. No thunder, no flame, just a stillness so sharp it pierced the bone. Leo lowered his eyes. He didn't resist. He remembered. Then the second angel spoke. He welcomed the sacrament of unity, where the altar held no sacrifice, only a symbol. The air cracked, not with rage, but with grief. A grief heaven still carried, for what earth had normalized. Then came the third seal. He removed sin from the catechism, called it trauma language for modern minds. Each word dropped like stone into a soul, not loud, but unmovable. I wanted to look away, but I was made to witness, because this wasn't about vengeance. This was unveiling. And then, from behind the throne, it arrived, a figure cloaked in elegance, its face too perfect. Not beautiful, strategic, like compromise sculpted into charm. One hand held a golden crown, the other, a crown of thorns, blackened, bent, hollowed. It placed the gold on Leo's head. He didn't flinch, because he didn't see it. Not possession, agreement. And that's when Jesus moved. He didn't walk, he was. Presence, flame without smoke, wounded, silent. And when he spoke, every book bowed. He is not the Antichrist. He is the bridge to it, the voice before the beast, the architect of harmony. That cost my truth. He traded blood for applause. He built unity without me. No one else moved. Then he looked at me, not like a stranger, like someone he had once warned in private, and now returned to hold accountable. You are not here to judge. You are here to remember. Because when the veil tears, the ones who didn't speak will answer first. My knees buckled. I had preached tolerance when I should have preached fire. I had offered silence when I should have screamed. And then he pointed, not at Leo, at the angel holding a book with my name. It pulsed, not with glory, but with opportunity wasted. And I understood. This wasn't just Leo's unveiling. It was mine. If I stayed silent again. Then the walls shook. The throne cracked down the middle. From beneath it came a sound not of thunder, but of something even more terrifying. The cry of every hidden believer. Mothers praying alone in dim kitchens. Children kneeling without answers. Priests who died unknown. Never shaking the Pope's hand, but gripping the cross till their last breath. And they cried in unison, Christ alone, Christ always, Christ everywhere. That sound didn't burn the deception. It emptied it. Truth doesn't destroy evil. It drains its power. The golden crown on Leo's head dissolved. The blackened thorns hit the ground. Jesus didn't pick up either. He touched Leo's heart. And when he did, the thing hiding in Leo's shadow screamed. Not like a beast, but like a memory being evicted. Then he turned to me again. Not smiling, not grieving, just present. You have seen. You cannot unsee. So now, speak. Not to gather crowds, not to provoke fear, but to find the ones whose silence is not denial, but exhaustion. He paused and whispered, tell them I still recognize the broken ones. And then, everything vanished. When everything vanished, I didn't fall. I returned. But not to life, at least not as I knew it. I woke up with a silence inside me that didn't belong to this world. Tubes down my throat, lights above me. A nurse cried. A doctor whispered my name, like it might fall apart if said too loudly. But I wasn't void anymore. I was fire. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that burns slowly through everything that pretended to be safe. I didn't ask for water. I didn't ask what happened. I asked for a pen, and I wrote. Not a sermon, not a book, a warning. 5 words. He is not the one, that's all. It shook the first man who read it. A priest. He folded the paper and never gave it back. Within hours, I was visited, not by family, but by hierarchy. Some curious, some unsettled. One asked, what did you see? I said, what heaven remembers when earth forgets. Another warned, the church is fragile. I answered, then it was never built on the rock. They offered rest. Interviews. I declined, because the only thing that mattered now was his whisper. Speak, then be silent. I left the hospital with no one waiting, not even the crowd that once applauded my sermons. That was the first miracle. No applause. Because had they cheered, I might have still needed it. But he burned that need out of me. I went back to the small chapel behind my childhood parish, the one where the plaster peels and the candles flicker unevenly. I sat in the back pew where no one notices a man not wearing vestments. And I listened, not to voices, not to theology. I listened for that silence that weighs more than sound. And it came. An old woman knelt near the altar. Her hands trembled through each bead of the rosary. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her silence answered more than sermons ever could. In that moment, I knew she was the remnant. Heaven's unseen bride. Bent in body, unshakable in spirit. That night, I couldn't sleep because his voice returned, not aloud, but through the ache. The kind of ache you feel when you've seen too much and can't pretend anymore. I asked, why me? But there was no pity in the silence. only purpose. I knew I hadn't been chosen because I was holy. I had been chosen because I had stayed silent once. And now he needed a voice that remembered what silence costs. In the days that followed, I spoke with many. Some listened with tears. Some defended their comfort like a throne. But a few, a sacred few, leaned in and whispered, "I felt it too, but I thought I was the only one." Those are the ones I speak to now. The ones whose souls twitch at language that sounds right but feels wrong. The ones who cried after Mass and couldn't explain why. The ones who watched bishops smile and felt something curl in their stomach. The ones who dared to ask, "Lord, is it still you? You are not crazy. You are being separated, not cast out, called into a place that isn't on any map, a remnant path that bleeds through thorns and silence, a place that feels lonely until you realize you're not alone. You're just early. The first to feel the break doesn't mean the first to fall. It means the first to stand. And if you're standing now, even trembling, even weeping, then know this: heaven has already counted you. I haven't returned to the pulpit. I don't think I ever will. The pulpit has become too polished, too safe. Truth was never meant to echo off gold leaf. It was meant to be whispered through prison bars and blood-soaked ground. I no longer wear the garments they gave me, not because I reject my calling, but because I've finally remembered it. I wasn't called to be followed. I was called to follow, even if that means walking straight into rejection, exile, or death. He didn't say, "Be successful." He said, "Be faithful." And that means bleeding quietly if needed, speaking softly but never lying, and holding the line even when the church forgets where it was drawn. They asked me last week if I believed Leo XIV was a false pope. I said nothing, not because I was afraid, but because the question itself missed the point. This is no longer about men in robes. This is about the system that replaced the bride with a brand, the stage with smoke and applause, while the altar sat cold. It's about the kind of power that never bends to wash feet, and the kind of peace that never comes from compromise. I didn't return to expose Leo. I returned because something far worse is coming, and the deception has already worn a smile. So I speak now, not to the masses. I speak to the remnant, to the woman who weeps before the Eucharist no one else reveres, to the man who left a cathedral because he couldn't feel Christ there anymore, to the child who heard something different in the silence after communion. You are not forgotten. You are not lost. You are not rebellious for resisting what feels fake. You are remembering something the church itself has tried to forget, that holiness was never meant to trend. This isn't about creating a movement. There is no movement. There is only one shepherd, and he is not confused. He is not caught off guard. He has not lost the map. He knows where his bride is, even if she's scattered in basements and ruins, even if she wears no name and holds no microphone, even if she walks barefoot through a forest because no chapel would let her kneel. He knows, and he is watching, and soon he will move. But until then, we whisper, we burn, we bleed, and we wait, not in fear, not in pride, but in reverence, because the hour of separation has already begun. And if you've read this far, maybe, just maybe, your soul already knew that too. It began with a dream, not a vision, not a revelation, just a dream. So ordinary, I nearly ignored it. I was walking through a church I didn't recognize. The pews were full, the altar radiant, and the choir sang in perfect Latin. But something was wrong. The crucifix above the sanctuary was veiled in silk, and no one noticed. Not the priest, not the people, not even the children. They worshipped in precision, but without presence. And the silence above the veil grew heavier with each note sung. I whispered, "Where is he?" No one answered, not even heaven. When I woke, I couldn't breathe. Not from fear, from urgency. That day, I went to 3 different churches. I sat quietly, observing. No agenda, no judgment, just listening. And everywhere I went, I saw the same thing: form without fire, reverence without weight, liturgy without hunger, as if the bride had put on her wedding dress, but the groom had not arrived. Or worse, he had, but no one recognized him. That night, I returned to the chapel, the one where silence still carried weight. I lit a single candle, and I prayed one sentence: "Lord, if I am wrong, silence me. But if I am right, send the flame." I didn't expect what came next. It started quietly. Reports, whispers, disappearances. A young seminarian removed from his post after questioning a new liturgy. A priest relocated for refusing to bless what cannot be blessed. A bishop stripped of his faculties for saying the word repent too often. And then the letter came. Anonymous, but written in the same cadence heaven had once used on me. It said, "You are not alone. We've seen it too. But they are moving faster now. The next decree will come without warning. And when it does, the remnant must be ready not to fight, but to stand still and burn." I burned that letter after reading it. Not out of fear, out of reverence. Some things are not meant to be passed around. They're meant to be carried in the marrow. A week later, the Vatican released a new document, official, public, glorious in tone. It was called The Greater Embrace, a path to global belonging. I read it in silence. Every paragraph shimmered with unity, inclusivity, brotherhood. And yet, between the lines, I heard something else, a soft erasure of sacrifice, of absolutes, of the name that once divided light from darkness. The name above all names, replaced with the concept of one shared essence. I remember one line exactly. The future church will no longer convert. She will accompany, and in doing so, transcend the need for separation. I closed the document, and I wept, not out of rage, out of sorrow, because I knew what would come next. And it did. Within days, churches began to remodel their sanctuaries. Statues were removed, not violently, but quietly, as if they'd simply grown outdated. Altars were redesigned to reflect a shared table of experience. The crucifix remained, but was dimmed by new lighting. Some replaced it entirely with symbols more inclusive of the human journey. In one city, a church displayed a rotating hologram above the altar, cycling between sacred figures of all faiths. Jesus appeared every 7th rotation. I stood in the back of that church, watched the congregation applaud, and I said nothing. But my soul screamed. That was when he returned. Not in form, in fire, quiet, like breath against the skin of the Spirit. I was alone in the chapel again. The candle had nearly gone out, and then the flame turned blue. It flickered, not from air, but from presence. And I heard him, not with ears, but with weight. They will not call it betrayal. They will call it expansion. They will not say my name less. They will say it alongside others. And the ones who speak will not be hated. They will be pitied, called relics of a stricter age, and some will be silenced in ways the world applauds. But those who remain, those who do not compromise, I will shelter them, not from suffering, but from deception. Because in the hour of collapse, the only ones who will stand are the ones who already fell at my feet. And then silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was holy. I stayed in that silence for hours, maybe days. I don't remember eating. I don't remember time, only stillness and the weight of knowing. We were not preparing for revival. We were preparing for division. I've stopped asking for clarity. I now ask only for courage, because the next wave is not theological. It is spiritual. It is not about doctrine. It is about discernment. The serpent does not bite this time. He blends, he nods, he affirms, and those without ears, trained by silence, will hear nothing wrong. But something will lake, deep, quiet, like a forgotten instinct, trying to remember what it once knew in fire. I've begun to meet others, quiet souls, some former priests, some hidden prophets, some just grandmothers who never stopped weeping during Mass. We gather, not to plot, to witness, to kneel, to remember what it used to feel like when heaven breathed during the Gloria, when the altar trembled during consecration, when silence after communion made you cry because he was that close. We don't demand change. We prepare for exile, because exile is not punishment, it is protection, and the moment is closer than most think. Soon, something will be declared, and it will sound beautiful, and many will embrace it, and those who don't will be shamed as rigid, hateful, unchristlike. But they won't fight, because they'll know this isn't their battle. It's their separation. Their call to walk out, not in protest, but in pain, and to follow a whisper that leads into the wilderness, where the bride is waiting. Not angry, not loud, not relevant, but ready. It came without announcement. No trumpets, no alarms. Just a headline, calm, polished, clinical. Vatican confirms new global liturgical framework. I remember the way the article avoided using the word change. Instead, it said evolution, not replacement, integration. The Mass, it said, would now be reimagined as a universal celebration of the human spirit, where sacred narratives across traditions are honored equally. Jesus was mentioned twice, once as central figure of origin and once as part of the evolving mosaic of divine experience. I didn't finish reading. I didn't need to. The veil had torn, not from top to bottom, but from inside the church itself. And no one screamed. They celebrated. Some wept with joy. Some whispered that it was overdue. But those who wept for the right reason, they wept in silence. Not from shock, from confirmation. This was it. The moment we had been warned would come, not as thunder, but as consent. I returned to the chapel that night, not to hide, to wait, because I knew what he would do next. He would not shout, he would not strike. He would whisper to the ones who still knew his voice. And he did. The room dimmed, not from light, but from weight. The candle flickered. My bones ached in places that had no name, and I felt him step into the room without moving. Now is the hour, he said, not of wrath, of recognition. My sheep know my voice, and my voice is not always loud, but it is never false. They have built the stage. and filled it with light. But the cross still casts a shadow they cannot remove. You have seen, you have heard. Now, will you stand? The silence that followed was surgical. I knew the question wasn't rhetorical. I knew it required blood. I said nothing, not from fear, but because every part of me was calculating the cost. I had already lost everything visible. But now, I would lose what was left of safety, anonymity, protection. I would become marked, not by the world, but by heaven. Set apart, called, hunted. I whispered yes, and heaven didn't applaud. It just stood still, as if that answer triggered a countdown the world wouldn't notice until it was too late. The next day, I received the letter, sealed in red wax. No name, no sender. Inside, a single sentence. They have declared the threshold open. The bride must now decide whether to enter or to weep. I knew what it meant. A line had been crossed, not legally, spiritually, and with it, those who remained silent would not just fade, they would fall. Slowly, gently, with beautiful language and progressive praise, but fall nonetheless. So I gathered what little I had. 2 letters I never sent. One to a bishop I once trusted. The other to a woman who once prayed over my calling before I believed I had one. And I walked, not toward the cathedral, but away from it, into places no camera enters, into silence thick with memory, into the places where exile is not exile, it's assignment. They say the church cannot fall. And they're right. The real church cannot. But not everything wearing her colors still belongs to her. The garments may remain, but the fire has moved, and the ones carrying it don't look like saints. They look like you, like me, bent, unknown, unwanted, unapplauded, but burning. There are rumors now of underground masses offered with broken hosts and trembling hands, of children who speak in dreams what no priest dares utter, of miracles happening in silence because heaven no longer seeks platforms. It seeks altars without pride and voices that will speak only if he breathes through them. I have become one of those voices, but not to teach, not to lead, to warn. And this is the warning. The division has already happened. Quiet, spiritual, permanent. Those who chase unity at the cost of truth have already chosen. Those who remain silent in the name of peace have already spoken. And those who still kneel, though the lights are off and the incense gone, those are the ones he will call mine. So now you must decide, not by liking this, not by sharing, but the next time you kneel, ask yourself one question. Am I kneeling before the stage or the cross? Because what's coming will not make space for both. He said he would separate, not explain. And that hour is no longer near. It is here. So if something in you stirred, if your soul felt seen, not by me, but by what passed through me, then know you've already been counted. Not because you're loud, not because you're right, but because you still feel the ache when others only feel applause. You are not forgotten. You are the remnant. And the world does not understand you because it was not meant to. You weren't called to be understood. You were called to be faithful. And so I leave you with this. I don't know your name. I don't need to. But when he returns, not to comfort, not to explain, but to divide, may he find you among the thorns, not the lights,